Hi everyone, sorry if the noise is quite bad, it's raining really heavy outside. Okay, I'm just going to start up straight up. The grade that this lesson is aimed at is grade 1, and the class is a high socioeconomic school, private Catholic school. It's a really well-behaved class. There are 6 students that are particularly slow when completing their work, so you always have to take that into consideration when you're planning your lessons, that these kids are really fast, they might finish really quickly, and then these ones, slow coaches, won't get it finished pretty much. There's 2 in particular that are very bad. One learner, he's being, I guess, what do they call it? He's being watched at the moment to be monitored to see if he has some form of autism. He's very particular, and sometimes he's good if he's interested in the work, otherwise he doesn't do it at all. And one has a really bad speech, and his writing is, you can't read it. Okay, so this lesson is about 3D shapes. It's the second lesson in the term about 3D shapes, and students had some prior knowledge of the name of shapes. This lesson focuses on teaching students the attributes of 3D shapes and having them identify everyday objects that are 3-dimensional. It links with the Australian curriculum under the Year 1 Measurement and Geometry strand. For shape, content descriptor is recognise and classify familiar 2-dimensional shapes and 3-dimensional objects using obvious features. And the elaboration is focusing on geometric features and describing shapes and objects using everyday words such as corners, edges, and faces. And the lesson outcome is for students to be able to identify attributes of a 3-dimensional shape and that they can recognize everyday objects that are 3-dimensional. In the first lesson, they did have a little bit of trouble recognizing shapes around the room, so hopefully with the attributes being explained to them, they will be able to identify them more easily. Okay, there is a PowerPoint that I printed it out just because I can't show it on here. A PowerPoint that pretty much is the introduction of the lesson, except it goes over into the body, because to introduce the topic on the PowerPoint, it goes over what they learned in the previous lesson. It goes on to say, last Monday we learned about 3-dimensional shapes. We compared the characteristics of a 3-dimensional and 2-dimensional shapes. And then it'll be a discussion, a lot of discussion. So can anyone remember some of the differences between the two? And hopefully students will put their hand up and you'll say a 3-dimensional shape has height and a 2-dimensional shape is flat, and use your hands. We spoke about some of the attributes of different dimensional shapes, such as faces and sides, edges and corners. The faces can be curved or flat. So, and the different 3-dimensional shapes that we're talking about are cube, sphere, rectangular prism, cylinder, cone, and triangular prism. And then, so after the introduction, you talk about everything that you learnt last week. You'll go in and say briefly what the lesson today is about. So just today we'll be discussing in more detail the attributes of 3-dimensional shapes. We'll talk about how many corners the shapes have, how many sides they have, how many faces, and if they're curved or flat. Okay, then, so this is the body now. You'll go in and there's a slide allocated to each shape. So cube, rectangular prism, cylinder, sphere, triangular prism, and a cone. And the cube, it has a picture, I don't know if you can see, it has a picture of cubes, and then it just has some writing there. And that's basically to prompt me. It's okay, does a cube have curved or flat faces? And how many faces? So these are questions for the kids that they will answer. and then you'll have concrete material in your hand to also help them and stimulate them by counting with them after they answer the question. So they'll say, cube has such, faces. So they'll be like, a cube has 6 flat faces, and a cube has 12 edges, and a cube has 8 corners. So you just make sure that you say faces meet. So where the faces meet is an edge, and where the corner is the point where the edges meet. So just make sure you discuss that. So you'll go through cube, rectangular prism, cylinder, sphere, triangular prism, and cone. Also, with the sphere, cone, and cylinder, you'll talk about how the difference between flat and curved faces, and also with the sphere, how there's no edges or no corners. So that is something you will talk about. Once you have gone through that, you'll then ask again the same question as the first lesson, talking about what objects around our classroom are 3D shapes. So you'll get kids put their hands up, can we see any new 3-dimensional shapes in the classroom? And hopefully they'll answer things like glue sticks. They have pencil holders on their desk that are cylinders as well. There's lots of boxes. So there's rectangular boxes, rectangular prism boxes, and cube boxes in the classroom, cupboards and things like that. Then you'll go on. I know that if they're getting restless, you will get them to stand up and do, we have a freeze song that you put on, and just gets them to move and then freeze. And that always gets, because if they're starting to get a bit agitated on the carpet, then this is a good thing to do, because you want them to be listening to the instructions. The next sheet is a shapes worksheet, and it has pictures of everyday objects. Now this is basically just to see if the students know the names and can identify. So you'll model it to them briefly. You'll get students to come up and help, because it says, colour the item shaped like a cone red, colour the item shaped like a sphere blue, colour the item shaped like a cube in green, and colour the item shaped like a rectangular prism in yellow, and colour the items shaped like a cylinder in purple. So I have just coloured the word, the colour, and then students have come up and coloured in the correct one, and then as you can see they have to go and identify more. I would be careful with this one here, because that is a cylinder but it doesn't look like all the other cylinders, so maybe just be sure to explain and talk about them before you do that. That sheet shouldn't take too long, but like I said, there are some slow learners in my class, so it will take other students longer than it should. So to conclude the lesson, as an extension, I'll be putting out concrete materials on the carpet, so shapes, and students can come out, bring their maths books, and they'll be drawing the shapes and even labeling, so corner, edge, face, and they can write how many. It just depends, and they'll be drawing them basically, because they won't have that much time left in the 25-minute lesson. But you always have to have that extension there for those fast learners, because you don't actually just want to be giving them another worksheet either. You want to be extending on the lesson that they've just done. Okay, so if students were able to correctly identify everyday 3-dimensional shapes around the classroom and correctly do the sheet, the worksheet, and colour them the right colours, you'll be marking as they go, but then they have met the lesson outcomes. And to evaluate my own teaching, I would just fill out a form saying, or just some brief dot points saying, were students engaged? Did students find it difficult to identify everyday three-dimensional shapes? Did students come up with good examples of 3D shapes in the classroom? What challenges did I face, and was the lesson effective? One quick last note as well is for your PowerPoint, I would make sure that you have just a sneaky page of answers with you, just so that you don't get it wrong yourself. I know that they're easy, but for myself, I always like to have something there just so that I don't freak out and have to do it with them. I hope you enjoy. I hope you understand what my lesson's going to be about, and thank you.